Right. In this video, we're going to start talking about the labor market, specifically the aggregate labor market, like the labor market that represents all employment in an economy. Um, so to do that, we're going to first take a look at um, supply and demand of labor and what exactly it is. So the labor market is just a market like everybody else, or like every other market that we've taken a look at. Specifically, though, supply of labor is determined by people that make their labor available, by workers, by households um, that have time and then technically sell their labor to firms who are the demanders of labor. Firms demand labor because they buy the labor services from households. Okay, the price of labor is the wage, considered the wage. And so like any other market, there's a market clearing wage where quantity demanded and quantity supplied are exactly equal to each other. Okay. This is called the market clearing wage. And the market clearing wage is where, again, quantity demand is going to be equal to quantity supply. Okay. So let's unpackage this demand curve, how we determine, what this demand curve is. Like, how do firms determine how much labor they're going to demand given a wage rate? Well, it's based off of something called the value of the marginal product of labor. And the value of the marginal product of labor dictates, the labor demand curve. Okay. So what is the value of the marginal product of labor? Well, the value of the marginal product of labor is essentially the benefit that firms get from hiring another worker. That benefit that they get, that marginal benefit they get from hiring another worker, is the price of the output, the price of the good that's being produced, whatever that sells at, times how much output increases from an additional unit of labor. Okay? Again, marginal benefit to the firm is the value of the marginal product of labor, which is found by taking the output price times the marginal product of labor from an additional unit of labor. The marginal cost, how much does it cost to hire that worker? Well, it's just the market wage. Okay? So a firm's going to hire a worker so long as the benefit is greater than the cost. So long as the value of the marginal product of labor is greater than the wage rate. How can we see this? Well, we can see it with an example. So assume there's a car wash that has a fixed amount of capital. Initially, they have 5 workers working at the car wash. They're each paid $15 an hour. The price of a car wash is $7. When there's 5 workers, the total amount of cars that can be cleaned per hour is 20. We can see that in the table here. Additionally, as more workers are hired, as we go from 5 to 6 to 6 to 7, we see the increases in the number of cars washed per hour. From this, we can find the marginal product of labor for each additional worker. We take the difference between the number of cars washed when we have 6 workers, and we subtract from that the number of cars washed when we only have 5 workers. So that increase in output is 4 units for the 6th worker. At a price of $7 per car wash, we get 4 additional cars washed from hiring that 6th additional worker at $7 each. The value of the marginal product of labor is $28. Okay, so this 3rd column and this 4th column can be found based off of the information provided on the productive abilities of the workers and the price that output sells for. Okay, so additional output from the 7th worker is 3, for the 8th worker is 2, for the 9th worker is 1 car wash at $7 each. You see the value of the marginal product of labor. So the question is, how many workers should the car wash hire? Well, remembering that the price of labor or the wage rate the cost to the firm of an additional worker is $15. Well, he should hire, or the car wash manager should hire the sixth worker. Why? Because the marginal benefit of $28 is going to be greater than the marginal cost of $15. Additionally, he should hire the seventh worker because, again, the marginal benefit is greater than the marginal cost. So there's going to be positive profit received by the car wash from hiring the seventh worker. However, the eighth worker, the marginal product of labor for the eighth worker, eighth worker only increases production by 2 car washes at $7 a pop. The value of the marginal product of labor is $14, which is less than the wage rate. Therefore, the car wash should only hire 7 workers. Okay. Taking this a step further, if the wage, let's say the wage was a penny under $28, remembering that the value of the marginal product of labor for the sixth worker is $28. Well, if the wage rate is exactly a penny under there, under that value of $28, then it makes sense to to hire that sixth worker. Why? Because the car wash is going to make a profit of 1 penny from hiring that sixth worker. Same is true when the wage drops to $20.99, $13.99, and $6.99. In each of those cases, the firm is incentivized to hire the next worker. Why? Because the wage is just under the value of the marginal product of labor. Okay? So what this says is that as the cost to hire a worker, the price, the wage rate, as that decreases, firms are going to be incentivized to hire more workers. Well, if we plot the value of the marginal product of labor on the y-axis and the quantity of labor on the x-axis for this car wash example, and we see this downward sloping relationship, which is going to determine the demand for labor, because if the wage rate is at $28, the car wash or the car wash manager is going to be exactly indifferent between hiring that sixth worker or not. So what I'm saying is the value of the marginal product of labor, so long as it's greater than the wage rate, the worker will be hired because it will create a positive profit for the firm. Okay? And so that's how we determine our labor demand curve. Okay? The labor demand curve essentially depicts the relationship between the quantity of labor demanded by firms and the market wage, which is going to be determined by the value of the marginal product of labor. Okay. On the other hand, the labor supply curve is the relationship between the labor supplied by households. This should be by households or workers households, workers, people, and the market wage. So typically, as the wage increases, workers are incentivized to work more hours. Why? The marginal benefit of working has gone up, while the marginal cost, assumingly, stays the same. Okay. So if we put that together, we see that, again, we have this upward sloping supply curve, this downward sloping demand curve. Again, from before, the intersection is the labor market equilibrium, and that'll result at a market wage rate that allows the market to clear. When markets clear, it means that quantity demanded is equal to quantity supplied. Okay, and that's what we see here. However, there's causes to the shifts in demand and supply of labor. These changes occur essentially when either changes to demand essentially occur when either the price or demand of the good changes, meaning the P in the value of the marginal, when we find the value of the marginal product of labor, or the marginal product of labor changes, like the additional output, the productivity of workers, if that changes. This can be an increase in productivity can occur from increases in technology, increases in physical capital because you have more workers have more capital to work with, and in human capital. Workers become more productive because they learn new skills that help them produce goods. Okay. On the supply side, changes to the supply curve occur when workers' preferences change. After World War II, more women, we just saw that in the previous video, that more women entered the labor market after World War II because they had a change in preferences for working. They preferred to work more so and were able to do so and learn some skills during the World War II time. And so their preferences for work changed, leading to an increase in the supply of labor. Additionally, opportunity cost of time. Typically parents, after having a newborn child, like to take some maternity or paternity time off. Well, in that case, their opportunity cost of time is really high. The opportunity cost of working is really high. Therefore, they decide, I'm going to forego working for a little bit, especially if they can still get paid and work. But even if they can't, some still forego working in order to spend more leisure time with a newborn child. Lastly, population and demographics. As there's less people that are able to work as your population ages, and those people aren't able to work. Well, that's going to change the supply of workers available. Okay. All right. So that's it for this video. In the next video, we'll unpackage some of the unemployment types, like why there is unemployment and what kinds of unemployment there is. And then we'll talk about the labor market even more and connect it to output and production.